Hello, YouTubers. Joe Kersey here at 11:55 in the morning Eastern Daylight Time on Friday, November 20th, 2015. And I thought I would use the interval in the iron column banging. Number 6 just finished this morning. They've had a productive morning. I think they may actually be done. So the rest of the day will be breaking down this big crane. Well, no, they've got other stuff. They've got a hang on these columns. Anyway, using that interval, I thought I'd talk to you about some stuff. See, I've made an outline here to stay kind of focused. Just a bit of an update from last Wednesday evening. Henry didn't come over, but Liz came over, and she brought some of the stuff that she'd gotten at this Kroger sort of wine and food buffet that Kroger puts on up there north of Lewis Center Road, off of 23, US 23. And apparently it's free. You know, so there's this whole subculture of these sort of suburban women in their 30s and 40s and early 50s, you know, rolling into this grocery store to pig out on, in this case, turned out to be crab and shrimp salad and ribs and pork. And see, that's what we had for supper that night. Well, this was a bit of a continuation about the morbidity and mortality conferences I was telling you about, from Wednesday evening. As I'd mentioned, we called them sighs and lies, and I remember this one patient. I worked particularly with one really good senior surgical resident. I'll just call his name. I won't tell you his last name because he's still very much alive and operating in the South somewhere. Interestingly, he also is a thoracic surgeon, I think. But his first name was Phil. We'll call him Phil. Well, that's what his name was, Phil. And we had a patient, we'll call him Mr. H. You know, sort of like Alcoholics Anonymous. Anyway, Mr. H had, fairly bad obstructive pulmonary disease, and he had had an abdominal operation of some sort. He had a vertical midline incision. Well, he coughed a lot, and he hissed, meaning that the fascia split apart, and I can't remember who the attending surgeon was and who would operate on this guy, but anyway, this man hissed, and it was on a weekend, and we couldn't get operating room time, until very, very late in the afternoon, and this was in the morning. We found it on rounds, and Phil says, we're not gonna wait around here till 5 o'clock in the afternoon to close this guy. He said, go down to Central Sterile Supply and get like a surgical pack of some variety. Not one of the major ones, but damn near a full set of instruments. He says, we're going to close this guy up here in his bed. And so that's what we did. Got some, got local anesthesia. You just, sterile field and, so forth. And, got one of the nurses in there to help, kind of swore her to secrecy. and and she, draped him off and local anesthetic. And we explained to him what I was doing. He was very amenable. We gave him a little extra bump with, I don't know, we gave him like a couple of milligrams of morphine or something. Because we didn't want him to cough. We really didn't want this guy to cough while we were doing this. And and indeed, this wasn't like a small. I mean, it was like we had to close the entire thing again. It took us about 45 minutes. And so it comes time to present complications at M&M conference the next week. And, wound dehiscence. That's, listed Mr. H, wound dehiscence. And Dr. Carey was chairman at that time, because he became chairman when I started in July of '72. Dr. Zollinger was chairman emeritus. He was still very much around, but it was Dr. Carey's show. And he says, Surge 3, wound dehiscence. What's the story on that? Phil stood up and says, he dehisced, we closed him. Okay, moved on. Didn't say, we closed him. We closed him, on the ward in his bed because we couldn't get operating room time. The guy did fine. He went home. Still coughing, but he went home. I will say, I'll tell you a Phil story very briefly. Well, I might tell you two Phil stories, but I'll tell you one for sure. When I bought my first house in September of 1975. And about 2 weeks after we moved in, we had a gas line leak. And it was going to be like $350 to fix this. Now this is in September of 1975. So the amount of money involved now would be approximately $1,500 to $1,600, because they had to dig up the front yard. Well, my salary was $700 a month, and my ex-wife's salary was around maybe $800, $900 a month. That's gross. That's not take home, by the way. So this was going to be a major hit, and we just bought this house, and I'd put $2,500 down on this $22,500 house. So I was kind of tapped out. I was just mentioning it, and Phil overheard it, and he says, "Oh, here," he says, "I can help you out." I said, "Oh, no. He says, "I moonlight at the student health center." He says, "And you can have my shift tonight." I said, "Oh, that's great." And I thought it'd be like maybe they might pay $70, $80, He says, I said, "What's it going to pay?" He says, think about $300. And so he essentially gave me income from his family to help me out by letting me take his shift that night. It really did make all the difference in terms of, staying above water. So God bless you, Phil, on that. I don't think I'll tell you the second story about it because it's, well, it might involve the statute of limitations. And actually didn't directly involve him. It involved one of his relatives. Moving along. Staying with the theme of M&M conferences, morbidity and mortality, size and lies. Sometimes they can actually be, stories, and grounded in truth. Well, that's what they're supposed to be. Now, it was very interesting as you had, Dr. Zollinger was one of the world's foremost experts in pancreatic surgery. Turns out Dr. Carey, who was the chairman after him, also one of the world's foremost experts in pancreatic surgery. And now Dr. Zollinger was friends with a fellow that he had met over in Europe in the military in the Second World War. Was a fellow named Maurice Mercardier. And it turns out, there's a theme here, that Maurice Mercardier was one of the world experts in pancreatic and liver surgery. Well, they're good buds. They would visit each other, when they would go to each other's countries. They both raised roses. They both liked to use expired bank blood on their roses. I guess the iron is good for roses. In any case, I'll lead into the three of these guys after I tell this story. Given the pancreatitis theme here, necrotizing pancreatitis is a bastard, and sometimes it strikes right out of the blue. I remember this one guy. Turns out he was from Waynesville, Ohio, which is just north of where I grew up in Lebanon, Ohio, in Warren County, Ohio. And this guy, actually, it's very interesting. This was the second time I encountered this man. The first 2 months I was I did my first year of surgery residency, my 1 year of surgery residency. First 2 months I was on the thoracic surgery services, and I encountered this guy. This may have actually been when I was a medical student. But anyway, I encountered this guy on a thoracic surgery service at some point. And he had been in the oil fields in Alaska. This was back during the initial oil boom and building the pipeline and Prudhoe Bay and I knew a number of people. A couple 3 guys from my high school graduating class went up there and worked. And paid them like $120,000 a year. And that's in 1972 money. These guys just cleaned up. And they'd come back, and they were able to get themselves set up fairly nicely. Anyway, this guy had been up there, and during the examinations, they did a chest X-ray. They found what's called a coin lesion on his lung. Well, coin lesion can be anything. It can be a cancer, it can be a hamartoma, it can be a little collection of fibrotic stuff from an infection, In this man's case, he went in, had the full workup, can't find anything, little mini thoracotomy, pull out the thing, sew it up. It's a hamartoma, which is basically an overgrowth of tissue. Benign. Did well, went home. Back to Waynesville. Then he shows up with full-blown necrotizing pancreatitis. He had been at the state fair. He had gone to the state fair here in Columbus with his family and got this sudden, intense, acute abdominal pain, prostration, fever, vomiting, almost cardiovascular collapse. No, it wasn't heat stroke, although that could easily be the case, at the Ohio State Fair, in early August. So in he comes, and he's basically, his pancreas has, decided to kill itself and rot inside of him. That's basically the basic pathology of necrotizing pancreatitis. It's sort of the final common pathway of whatever particularly causes it. He had repeated operations, put these big drains in each side, and you'd flush them out, irrigate, and handfuls of dead crap into the pan. Well, it's interesting. At that stage of the game, Ohio State University Hospital only had a 6-bed ICU. Well, he apparently didn't make the cut. So what the solution was? Well, what happened was you'd set up these little miniature ICUs in like standard 2-bed rooms. You'd have like a number of little 2-bed mini ICUs throughout the hospital. This guy was, in one of those setups. He was on the ventilator for a while, and had to irrigate his drains, and then, ultimately ended up changing packing, packing in, packing out. And essentially, if you were staying that night if you were the person staying that night for the first year resident on call, you'd end up staying. You'd basically stay in his room. You'd drift in and out of sleep. While you flew the ventilator and made sure you're still having urinary output and all that kind of stuff. And he was ultimately in the place for around 9 months. Now, I think he went home, but I'll tell you, this guy was obviously never going to be the same kind of robust guy that he had been, when he was felled out there that day at the Ohio State Fair. But that's not the guy that was presented at M&M. So Dr. McCartier comes over to visit Dr. Zollinger. And we're going to have this sort of special festive M&M conference, that focuses on pancreatic complications and things. And Dr. Interestingly enough, the senior surgical resident was not going to present to Dr. McCartier. One of the first year surgical residents was going to present to Dr. McCartier. And Dr. Carey selected me. Now, interestingly enough, I had not directly participated in the care of this patient, although I was certainly aware of this patient because it was, all these cases were sort of notorious, because you end up cross-covering at night. And he says, I want you to present to Dr. McCarty, and he rivets you with the intense blue eyes, just nail you to the back of the wall. God bless him. One of my heroes. And and needless to say, of course, then the more senior residents were taking me aside, saying, "You better not fuck this up. You better not make us look bad." So you had, go through the entire chart. And this was one of these big, thick bastard charts, and all the X-rays, things, and come the day, I do that, and it went off fairly well. I don't think I didn't really, because you can't refer to the chart. You have to know all this stuff. You have to know all this stuff. And Dr. McCartier got up, didn't say anything about whether, if you were unclear about this. You just then started to discuss. I thought that was, and that happened despite the fact that Dr. Carey knew I was not going to stay. I was going to go into anesthesia. I mean, I was going to stay at Ohio State, but I was going to go into anesthesia. And I thought, I won't get to do anything anymore. Turned out, no, didn't lose a whit of my surgical experience that year because of my decision to go into anesthesia. But I digress. So, as I said, McCartier and Zollinger, were good friends, and they shared a love of roses, but they also shared a love of cats. Now, I tell you, I mean, I've never met a cat that I couldn't dispense with. Humanely, or at least just absent yourself from me. Anyway, so Dr. Zollinger had this cat that had this big abscess on its belly or somewhere. Well, cat had an abscess. Now, these guys like to have a few brandies after dinner. And McCartier says, "Well, hell, we can drain that abscess." And Zollinger agreed they could. So, I don't know what they used to sedate this cat, because obviously this cat wasn't going to submit to having an abscess drained on it, without some degree of sedation. But anyway, they got the cat under control somehow. And so they did it on Zollinger's kitchen table. This is real. This is real. This is a real hark back to when my dad told me about how people would get their appendixes operated on the kitchen table under a kerosene lamp. And they say, "Operate on this cat on this kitchen table." Zollinger's wife heard all this commotion. Guess the cat didn't settle down all that quietly. And came down and saw him draining all this pus out under the kitchen table. I understood the cat did just fine. I understand the cat did just fine. Well, there it is. I think today's little onslaught of history is over with. So I'll say bye-bye, YouTube.